Robert, I'm so excited that you're with us to talk about resilience
Oh,
today.
yes, yeah. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You have a tremendous background professionally that speaks to, you know, being resilient in some really challenging careers and situations. And I wonder if we can start out this conversation by you sharing a little bit of that background with us and how you've applied resilience along the way.
Sure. I think the first thing to acknowledge is that I didn't call it resilience back in the day. And I was in the Navy for 6 years. I did, long hours. When you're underway in the service, most of the time you're working, your short day is 12 hours.
Wow.
You could certainly work 18 hours as your long day, and then drills, and depending on where you were and things. And, you could go and be working for more than 24 hours straight. So, thinking back on it now, you would deem that as resilience, what keeps you going. We just didn't call it
Hmm.
resilience. So, and I remember, one of the most uncomfortable times thinking about it is we went to general quarters going past, out there in a desert storm, and it was 4 hours where we had to wear gas masks. And of course, just coming out of the pandemic and people wearing, paper masks and, medical masks and N95s and things, brought me right back to when I had to wear a gas mask, which is very restrictive for obvious reasons.
Hmm.
And just wearing that for, 4 hour shifts became very stressful. And when you first put it on, they give you a little bit of training in boot camp. You go through what they called the gas chamber, which was just OC gas that you had to go in, have your mask on. It taught you how to put it on correctly, and you shouldn't smell anything while you have your mask on. But then you had to take it off and say the alphabet or your first general
Wow.
order, or something like that. And your eyes watered up immediately, and you're just your mind goes all sorts of haywire just saying
Hmm.
anything because you just want to be out of the situation. Um, so just going through things like that, and the service was definitely, an example of resilience that I just didn't name resilience, but kept me going through and not getting, to the point of, not doing what I was ordered to do. And I think we'll talk about some of that, the difference between being told what to do and how you work your self-talk, how what you tell yourself is a little bit different than, if you're volunteering in that
Yeah.
situation or you don't have to do this, that, or the other thing.
Did you find that that others in that setting had a more challenging time sticking with it? Did you see people leave as a result of some of those really trying environments that you were put in?
I think so. I definitely think that it's not for everybody. I mean, that's certainly what people can say. And one of the things we talk about resilience is this resilience about leaving a bad situation.
Hmm.
And I did 6 years. I realized it was not really what I wanted to be doing, but that gave me the motivation to figure out how to leave the service, in a way where I went and got my schooling, my undergrad, and then my master's, because I realized at the time I didn't want to stay in that situation. It wasn't the best fit
Hmm.
for me. I certainly wasn't, finding meaning and purpose and all sorts of what I thought the experience would be. So, and that's certainly a type of resilience that, people need to leave a situation that is not working for them.
I
On
love
the
that.
contrary, I know people who stayed in the service who did not like it, but for one reason or the other just didn't leave. And that always was surprising to me that they would stay and at least say out loud if they were being honest and not just, complaining that they didn't like the service, but they didn't leave. It's a little different when you have a contract where you have certain times, that are you sign up for 4 years or 8 years or 6 years or however it goes, and that kind of helps you get towards the end versus just being in a job, let's say, you didn't like. And I'm sure you have, in past jobs or something like that, you've known a colleague who didn't like their job and maybe would complain a little bit more than the next person. And sometimes you wonder to yourself, why is this person staying in this position that they don't really like? And you wonder if, everybody's different and some people just like to complain more. But, if people really don't like what they're doing, how can they build up that resilience to move on to a different opportunity versus staying in what they would consider a negative
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah, I really like this concept that you're pulling out here, which is this idea that resilience is not just not responding in a bad way when adversity hits, but there's something really proactive about it. It's taking steps to step away from difficult situations as much as it is about pushing through when you're in one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really the fourth type of resilience we talk about, and a lot of people don't realize this. But certainly in a sadder situation or more serious situation, we think of domestic violence, and some people stay in the situation, and because they can't see an outcome, they are being controlled or manipulated or physically restrained in a terrible, terrible
Hmm.
situation, but they internalize that they're very strong because they can put up with it. And unfortunately, that gives them a sense of hope that, I can do this because they're so far deep into such a tragic situation
Hmm.
that sometimes they don't have the wherewithal to leave because they're being manipulated, so much.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's one of the parts of resilience that not a lot of people recognize. Most people think of resilience as, getting up when the alarm goes off if you didn't get a good night of sleep. That's daily resistant or resilience that everybody uses.
Hmm.
How do you deal with traffic and things like that? So that's the more common type. We certainly have the post-traumatic stress disorder type resilience, like you've had a terrible childhood or maybe an experience in
Hmm.
war or something like that, where
Post-traumatic growth, I think they
hmm
call it, right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, now, right? Yeah. So that's a type of resilience that some people have to deal with. And then there's the other thing is like when you have some tragic event that comes into your life, an unscheduled, an unscheduled illness or, something happens where you have to figure out the strategy to get through, that. So those are really the four types of resilience that a lot of people have identified. So
I love that, and I want to put a pin in that because I want to finish looking at your background and then circle back to these different types of resilience and how they kind of build on each other and the skills that we can apply to use those in our lives. But I want you to say more about where you went after the Navy service, and maybe even about how the skills of resilience that you perhaps gained there helped you in the career path you took afterward.
sure. So I actually I knew I wanted to leave the service. I didn't know specifically what I wanted to do. One of the happy accidents, I guess you could say, was we had sometimes when you're underway, you would have a college professor come out, and this guy happened to be a retired master chief, and he came out and taught intro to history as a college course. You could, the GI Bill, and you could use your. So when you're active duty at the time when I was in, they would come out every once in a while, and just teach a class you could sign up for, and it would be a couple times a week and things like that. So I ended up doing intro history and also intro psychology. And psychology kind of piqued my interest, and I really liked that idea. So I started figuring out where I could go to school. I know I wanted to go to a big school because I had read trying to prepare to go to school, that most people changed their minors. At the time, it was like 4 times during their undergrad. So I wanted to go to a big school, a big
Lots
university.
of
So
choices.
yes, that's exactly right. I wouldn't pigeonhole myself into a very small school. So I ended up getting accepted at Texas A&M University, and I did my undergrad in psychology. If you're not familiar, Texas A&M at the time was the #2 school for population. I mean, it was a huge
You found your
school.
big school.
Yeah, I certainly could have changed my major. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so I got into psychology. I knew I was older, and that's another thing that I think I had practiced some of these skills throughout, my life, and you call that resilience, but I had practiced some of these. Okay, now I know what I want to do. I had a lot of the distractions, taken away from me. I didn't have to focus a lot on everything else because I knew what I wanted to do, and it was, important for me to get it done. So I definitely had a goal. I think I'm one of the I didn't want to change my major after I got into it. I stayed structured. I had my schedule pretty much figured out freshman year, which was a little
Amazing.
bit strange. And then sophomore year, I figured out that I was going to need to, if I wanted to stay in psychology, that I was going to need a master's degree. So I started to talk to some of the professors and find out. I know I had an advisor that was, I'm sure it was some lottery that I had, that an advisor was there for me. But I ended up befriending a professor, and he ended up being my, quasi advisor. And he's the one who kind of pointed me towards the direction with drug treatment. That was, really a burgeoning field, and something that I was interested in. So through connections he made, I went and got my master's in counseling psychology up at the University of North Texas. And one of the reasons I did that was I had many offers, or several offers, but the University of North Texas had a practicum with a correctional facility. So I could actually, the more I got into it and started thinking about corrections, drug treatment and corrections, and that really was good. So I ended up going to North Texas, and I did a practicum. I actually did a psychology practicum. So I was doing intelligence tests and objective tests for to work up a battery on various inmates, and then did my side work with drug treatment, and that's what led me to getting into drug treatment as a career.
Something sparked an interest in you in psychology to stick with it from freshman year on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious about that. But then what was it about drug treatment in particular, and then the correctional field in particular, that made you say, yes, this may be my calling. This is where I'm going?
Right. I think certainly in that practicum, you do practicums at different sites and things like that, but that practicum there really got me interested into. It's certainly an underserved population at all levels, and some entities do better than others at treatment. There are many places that don't do any sort of treatment. Statistics on substance abuse and the incarcerated population are just ends up becoming a cycle, and they just go into some situations if they can't get help. 95% of everybody who becomes incarcerated ends up getting back out, and if they don't have some of these skills, then that's an issue for recidivism. And I noticed it certainly in my practicums. That I was working with some of the inmates, they just and it wasn't always what you might think of the quintessential inmate. No parental guidance, no from a bad area, or it's not always that. There definitely are some of those people who come from really tragic backgrounds. They don't really have the leg up that many of us, certainly I did, from my background. But then there was also kids who went to college and ended up going down the same pathway because of substance abuse and alcohol abuse and things like that. So I guess that's really it. I really enjoyed getting a chance to work with that population.
Yeah, and I can see how, we're going to talk about a few skills of resilience in just a second, and I can see how those skills would be so vital among that particular population. Can you say more about what that looked like in that environment?
Well, almost like what I was speaking of earlier is a lot of them don't think they have any resilience. They don't think they have any skills, or they think they have very few skills. And then when you sit down with them and you talk to them about how they ended up where they are, then you could see how they did have resilience. Some of them who came from tragic backgrounds to just, keep going and, going through and trying and getting out there and making attempts to be successful versus, just giving up. That there are, those who have just given up and don't care. And tragically, there certainly are some people incarcerated who have all but given up, who just, have accepted that this is their, lot in life and that they're okay with that. And that institutionalization type mentality is very hard to work against.
I can imagine. What difference did it make when someone suddenly had that recognition for themselves? Oh, I am resilient and I've been resilient. What difference did that make in their choices going forward or their resilience from that point on?
Right. I think immediately one of the things you almost always got was a smile, and I never thought of it that way. And I think that is one of the very, just the building blocks of resilience is to realize or recognize past successes and to not forget that. I think that's something that can be, the kernel that starts the snowball that starts, down the road. And if you keep encouraging that and they learn how to celebrate those successes, being incarcerated, depending on where you are and, what situation you are, your survival skills, and not necessarily just physical survival skills, but just getting through the monotony of the day can also be a survival skill as well. And, when you can get that ball rolling or that snowball rolling, it can really take off. And it also becomes infectious. Other people notice that, this guy, hey, what's the change there and how he's doing better now, or he seems to be smiling more, or whatever it is, there's a change in his attitude. And again, you keep getting these things to add up and become more, it's that ripple effect, maybe.
Yeah.
The ripple effect with the individual, also the ripple effect out to others who he associates with or she associates with.
I think that's such an important lesson, more broadly speaking, in our society today. If you think about where we are as a society right now, we're stepping out of a year-plus long pandemic. And it can be, I think, we have a tendency to get really discouraged about that. So I wonder if you could say more about what it could look like for us as a society to recognize our resilience coming out of this and moving forward.
I forget who I was listening to, but it was talking about the Roaring '20s and the Roaring 1920s. And we had just come out of the pandemic, and everybody was just so excited, and the growth and, the community, and everybody seemed to be doing well. And so somebody was trying to compare it to that, whether we'll have this big growth spurt because everybody is so pent up from being home, not doing in-person training, the Zoom call fatigue and all that, and just getting out human beings are social people, for the most part, and just getting to be able to get together and have dinner and
Yeah.
laugh with old friends, or friends that aren't in your bubble, or however you manage the pandemic. So I can see that as getting this ball rolling where people are just going to be more excited and getting able to do more things. And the isolation definitely has increased, feelings of anxiety and
Right.
separation and depression and all these things. So hopefully we'll be able to, tear the lid off that and get back to some form of normalcy, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And going back to what you were saying about just recognizing your resilience, I think even those folks who have struggled with mental health during this time, well, particularly those folks who have been struggling,
Hmm.
um, for all of us to recognize just the fact that we got out of bed in the morning, or we showed up for that Zoom call, or whatever that looked like, taking that next step looked like for us, that was an act of resilience. I think that's an important awareness for us to have coming out of this.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
And as we look back, on it, so the stories you've heard about not being able to hug your grandkids, or
Mhm.
or people in nursing homes not being able to have contact, and things like that. And at the time, I mean, how did you get from March of 2020 to now April of 2021? How did you do it? Well, in essence, you did it one day at a time. You
Yeah.
just said, okay, I'm going to do this Skype call with my grandkids, and we're going to write letters and figure out all the ingenuity that's gone on during this pandemic. Certainly has been a sign of resilience that I want to hug my, grandkids. I don't know if you've seen the plastic gloves through the plexiglass walls, so people can hug, each other and things like that. And when you think about that, that's all, just a sign of resilience that you you're not going to just say to heck with it and just go be unsafe. You decided to do the right thing, but the ingenuity that comes from developing that plexiglass wall with the gloves so you could get a hug from somebody is amazing. And
Amazing.
so that's really so many things are going to come out of this that will end up benefiting um, the United States, or the world in general.
Yeah. I think we've hit on a really important skill of resilience in this first part of the conversation, which is just that recognition and using that awareness as a way to increase your confidence that you can continue to be resilient, I would imagine, and maybe even take on greater challenges, knowing that you have already done so.
Yeah, that skill of recognizing that stuff happens and how do we deal with it? What can we do? Just the proliferation of meditation apps and mindfulness and moments of Zen that flash up on the TV every once in a while. You see these, I mean, that's amazing to think that, hey, it's all these things that if I just take a few minutes, sit down, work on my breathing or just be present. Or the other thing is being present on the Zoom call with your kids or your grandkids. If they lived next door, they you saw them all the time. It was just, but now it's like, hey, this moment is precious that I get
Hmm.
to because I can't travel to see them. So I'm really going to focus, and that certainly helps.
So, another skill might be being present for today. We're not thinking too far ahead or too far back. What does it look like to be really present and aware in the here and now?
Absolutely, yeah. That's certainly one of the key skills of resilience is to just be present and not so future focused, and certainly not past focused. If all that you can think about is the big Christmas party every year, that's such a a fun thing to do, and that's all you thought about during December, then and the corporate Christmas party was not going to happen. Imagine how you would feel, just you would regret and resent and all
Hmm.
that hatefulness versus, focusing on, what's in the here and now and what can we do today to make this situation, as best as we can make it, because the Christmas party is not going to happen. So if we focus on the past when just all the good times. Now, if you did the slideshow Zoom and you put up the past memories and can't wait until we can do this again, that's a different type. But if you're just constantly focusing on this is miserable, nothing will come out of it, you're missing what's going on today and how you can make those connections today.
I think that's a really good segue into another skill of resilience that you've talked about, which is self-talk, paying attention to that conversation in your head and the way you're describing the events in your life. Can you say more about that as a tool for being more resilient?
Certainly. One of the first times I can think about self-talk, I was very young, and it was my father told me, he said, never say never. And I would go back and forth on him as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, just not understanding. And I would be pointing out, Dad, you just said never. And then, how can this be correct? That you've just
You said it twice.
Right. It was way too, it just blew my mind several times as I just, tried to figure this out. But, the one thing we are in control of is what we tell ourselves. So if you find yourself using absolutes, never, always, and things like that. So, what my dad was telling me when I was trying to make the basket, the free throw is that, and I told him, I can never do it, I can never do it, I can never do it. And he would just say never, which is basically, keep on trying. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe there'll be a different experience. Of course, he could pull out a ladder, and I could climb up the ladder and make the shot. And that's a different way of looking at it. But if you just tell yourself you can never do it, you're going to cut down on opportunities to look at the problem differently, and you just get down on yourself. So I think another one that people do is they jump to conclusions. And I notice this a lot with people not being in the room. So you don't get that facial expression. So you can't really go back and forth. It happens a lot in social media or texting when you're trying to be, funny or something like that, and people misunderstand it. So they jump to the conclusion, that person really is kind of, what's going on there? They're really picking at me. They're judging me. I know that. I know that they're judging me. When in essence, you might have just misread a text message, or heaven forbid, at my age, I misspelled something, or autocorrect has come across, and then you can start a whole big kerfuffle. So certainly things like that, where you're jumping to conclusions. What really did he mean? Or just a follow-up question was, what you tell yourself in that situation is just, I'm not really sure what he meant. Let me ask him. And by the way, that doesn't mean that person isn't judging you. It's just you're not jumping to the conclusion that person is judging you. And you can get down to, what really is the core, what's really going on in that interaction.
So does that self-talk, to what extent would you say that impacts our behavior and our choices?
Absolutely. There's that if you're cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral coaching or CBT, and, you go back to Ellis, and that's what drives our feelings or our emotions, which drives our behavior. So if you think that person is judging you, you feel irritated, angry, upset, and you storm off or you send a nasty text back. Versus if you tell yourself, I'm not really sure what's going on, that doesn't mean you've solved the problem, you're happy. You just maybe send a text back, I'm not really sure what you mean. Did I misunderstand something? So you're still confused. It's not that you're happy. But your action is you send the text back and try to get more information. One of the things people confuse with self-talk is that it's going to end up, everybody's going to be happy and singing Kumbaya. And that's not necessarily what's going to happen when you use, good rational self-talk. You're just trying to understand and control extreme emotions. If you have somebody driving, if you're driving in traffic and you're pretty wound up, you're trying to get somebody, somewhere, and somebody cuts you off. First of all, you have to look objectively. Did they actually cut you off? Sometimes it did. Sometimes you just weren't paying attention and they got in front of you. And you, in your mind, you say, that son of a gun, or other language, cut me off. You might even, wave at them, shall we say.
We
So,
shall.
yeah. So, and that's one of the things about, what's really going on. What are you telling yourself? And if you're telling yourself, I deserve to be in this spot and nobody else deserves to be in that spot, and somebody gets in that spot, most likely you're going to be angry and you're going to, honk the horn, or say something, that might be a little colorful towards that other person. Yeah.
Sounds like a major resilience deterrent, if you will.
Exactly
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly right. Yeah. So you work on just being as rational as possible, because that keeps you from having intense emotions. One of the things with resilience is, if you end up with very intense emotions, it's going to limit your ability to look at the next situation in such a way that you can handle it probably better.
Self-talk acts as a really helpful umbrella for another key resilience skill that you talk about, which is gratitude. Certainly, self-talk is a component of a gratitude practice. And I wonder if you could say more about how that functions as a resilience skill.
Yeah, I think gratitude, when you practice it, you certainly have to practice, and you have to practice changing your self-talk if your self-talk is irrational as well. But just practicing gratitude is a way of saying, looking at the situation in such a way that you're focusing on the positive. If somebody cuts you off in traffic, you can say to yourself, at least I'm driving a car. I didn't run out of gas. I know where I'm going, all these things, and you can work on that. So if you're putting the kids to bed and you say, I have to get the kids fed, I have to get them bathed, I have to get them to bed at a decent hour or they're going to be miserable in the morning, and you switch that around to, I get to do this because, just an extreme example, you're not in the hospital. You're actually with your children. You get to experience the joys, the ups and downs, though it may not feel it in the moment, but that you get the opportunity to do that versus something you have to do. So,
Beautiful.
yeah, that really helps.
It's a great reframe.
Yeah. And if you struggle with resilience with your children, getting them to bed every night because they're kids and don't want to go to bed, that is, that's the day-to-day resilience we have.
Yeah. All the parents in the audience are giving you a big amen right now.
I hope so, because in all honesty, I think, 99.9% of them have given up at one time,
Yeah.
and have lost that resilience and say, you know what, kids, you win this time. But we'll see next.
We'll try again tomorrow.
That's exactly correct.
One other question that I had was, you just had a granddaughter this last year. Beautiful, beautiful little baby. And I wonder if you could give her one piece of resilience advice. What would that be?
Oh, that is a tough one. It depends. I'm just gonna back out of that question a little bit. It depends on the age. How about that? I think it depends on the age. I think when
Okay.
you're young, it's important to express your feelings. I think it's important to express your feelings at all times. But when you're just learning about your feelings, to express those feelings, and then be able to talk with your mom or dad or something about where these feelings come from. Because sometimes anger is not really anger; it's just you're sad. But the only way you know to express it is by being angry. So that's really a self-talk type thing. But when you're 4, 5, 6, 8, and actually sometimes even when you're 40 or 50, you struggle with, where is this feeling really coming from? So I think that's certainly one key thing. And then as you get older, the gratitude stuff is very important as well. Just be happy that, what you do have versus what somebody else has. And that can be very difficult, especially for, a child who's, say, 2 or 3, who doesn't know social cues and will take toys. I don't know. I certainly can remember being scolded for not sharing, and but if we get into the be happy for what you have, but it's age appropriate. really, and that's one of the key things too. Because if it's too overwhelming, then you don't know.
Developing that emotional literacy in age appropriate ways as they grow
Yes,
up.
yes. Even if you're just, the child's having a temper tantrum or something like that, and or is just unconsolable, then just take them out. And, let's just go for a walk. Let's just go for a walk in the park, and I guess that's more stress reduction type thing. But if you learn how to self-soothe, you're certainly going to strengthen your ability, or your skills with resilience, because you'll be able to handle these things that come at you a little bit better at first.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. So to recap, if I'm a person listening to this podcast and I want to walk away with some key skills, what I've heard from this conversation is really start with a recognition and an awareness that you already are resilient, and you've exhibited resilience daily in multiple ways throughout your life, and using that as a tool to enhance your resilience going forward. And then along those same lines, we talked about mindful awareness and being present in the moment, and making sure that you're kind of savoring the situation that you're in at the given time. We talked about self-talk and making sure that your self-talk is accurate to the situation to kind of de-escalate the intense emotions that might come up. And under that umbrella, making sure to practice gratitude for the things that that you get to have as opposed to have to do in your day-to-day life. Was that an accurate sum up, would you say,
I
Robert?
believe so. Yeah, absolutely. One thing is there's many different ways to look at things, but those are certainly the points we brought up, and will help you deal with resilience wherever it appears in your life or wherever you need it in your life.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing these really, really vital skills with us, particularly as we come out of a pandemic, and these skills are more crucial than ever. So thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.